want to really talk about the topic that's probably close and dear to your heart, empathy.
The fundamental or the core definition of empathy really is an ability to understand other people's emotions and feelings, really understand and grasp the fact, and this was easy for me, started in the military, but really grasp the fact that every single person that we lead is the most important person in the world.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the IWillAim podcast. And our topic for today is leading with empathy. As a leader, we need to learn to lead empathetically, to serve your people and help them grow. With my guest today, Ben Morton. Ben, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Will. It's great to be talking to you on the show.
Looking forward to our conversation. Can we kick it off with a quick introduction from you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm Ben Morton. I'm based out of the UK. I'm a leadership trainer, executive coach, and keynote speaker. And leadership really is the thread that has gone through my entire life, from being a 6-year-old kid, leading teams and creating clubs at school, all the way through to leading in the military, corporate world, and now 13 years leading my own business.
Wow, a very diverse background, from being corporate, being in the military, doing your own business, and helping other people grow and develop. I want to really talk about the topic that's probably close and dear to your heart: empathy.
Yeah.
It's often talked about, but rarely defined. In the same way, how do you personally define empathy in the context of leadership?
So I think just before we get to the context of empathy in leadership, like the fundamental or the core definition of empathy really is an ability to understand other people's emotions and feelings. We often talk about being able to step into their shoes and
Yes.
see things from their perspective, to step into their world. Now, from a leadership perspective, it doesn't really change. It's fundamentally about knowing your people. And that is, as you say, very dear to my heart, because my first career in the military, that was the one thing from my training at Sandhurst, which is the UK's equivalent of West Point. It was just drummed into us again and again and again, like, get to know your people. If you're going to ask them to potentially make the ultimate sacrifice, or in business really go the extra mile, the thing that means people will do that is when they really have a sense that their leader knows them, understands what's going on in their world, and cares about them. So in a leadership context, it is knowing your people, and that in itself then starts to drive that extra discretionary effort that we're all always seeking, right?
Thank you for stressing the point around knowing your people, because knowing your people meant you had to intentionally spend the time, right? And as a result of intentionally spending the time, not only do you get to know them, you gain a deeper understanding of what motivates them.
Absolutely.
Thank you for stressing that. Why do you believe empathy is essential for today's leader, especially in a high performing organization?
Yeah. Interestingly, your question there, why is it important today? It is important today. It was important yesterday. It was important last year. It was important 10 to 20 years ago. It always has been really important. Interestingly, what has happened probably over the last 20, 30 years is there's been a real focus on management and management theory.
Mm-mm.
So the focus on people, on empathy, has slightly been lost, right? And it was Rear Admiral Grace Murray Hopper, a female US Navy general, who gave us the brilliant quote, which is, you manage things, but you lead people. So it always has been really important. But to your exact question, Will, I do agree and feel it's particularly important today, because you only need to look at the news, right? The world is more volatile and uncertain, perhaps, than it has been for a long, long time. Things are economically unstable, so people worry about the pounds, euros, and dollars in their own pocket. Politically, many countries are quite polarized, so people are feeling a degree of uncertainty. And again, when we know that our leaders care about us, that understand, have a sense of what's going on in our world, then that creates a sense of loyalty and motivation and engagement. And I hear some people say to me things like, why should I care about my people? What's going on for them out of work? I pay them to do a job. They should come to work and do that job. If we don't care about our people, how can we expect them to care about the work they do for us or our business? Right. So it really is about driving that effort. And people always have a choice about whether they continue to work for us or not. And if they feel their boss doesn't care, doesn't know them, just wants them to come to work, do what they're paid to do with no other engagement, there comes a point where people go, do you know what? The job market's unstable, but I don't feel valued or recognized here. So I'm going to take my chances and go and look somewhere else. People always have a choice. And I've come across plenty of people in the last few years who've left an organization with nowhere to go just because it was so bad. And they would take the risk of being unemployed rather than stay where they were.
Excellent point in talking about choice, because
Mm.
ultimately sometimes people don't want to deal with the toxic environment, right? And they focus on their health and well-being. Especially pandemic has proven that to us, where you're locked in and stay in your house for a long time. That's not good for you, and therefore same thing, we work for someone who actually don't have the empathy for their people and just push things really hard. I think, yeah, people have a choice.
Yeah.
So
And
now I
you
want to
mentioned
take it.
you mentioned the pandemic there, which actually that in itself was a great example of empathy in leadership. So
Hmm.
one of the quotes certainly that I heard a lot during the pandemic was, we're all in the same boat, aren't we?
Yeah.
Actually, and that was said with good intention, but actually that was quite an unempathetic approach
Yes.
or viewpoint to take. If you carry on the boat analogy, right? Some people were in luxury super yachts, very, very
Yes.
comfortable. Other people were in the equivalent of a dinghy. Others were clinging on to a bit of driftwood. So we weren't all in the same boat whatsoever. So that's empathy in action. The most empathetic leaders wouldn't have said we're all in the same boat, or if they did, very quickly they'd have said, actually, yeah, great point, you're right, I appreciate that, that was short-sighted of me. That is a brilliant example of empathy in action.
I think I like that you point that out, right? Sometimes out of good intention, bad outcome can yield its result. But also, it's also an opportunity for a good leader to take the feedback and realize that with their good intention, there was a bad outcome. But what can they do about addressing their
Exactly.
mistakes, right? That's
Exactly.
empathy in many ways.
Exactly, that's it in practice.
Some of the leaders, I think I've been in corporate for 34 years. Some of the leaders worry about when they try to be empathetic, they look like they're too accommodating, they're like pushover, they're soft. How must a leader handle that reflected persona that probably is not true? Because I personally have experienced that, where like, Will, you're too soft, you're too kind. Wow.
Yeah,
How does a leader handle that?
that's really common, Will. Like, I've certainly um heard things like that many times. I've heard many people sort of associate leading with empathy as being weak or not being about high performance. I had a coaching client many years ago who was, one of the things he was told to come to coaching for was he needs to be tougher. He needs to shout at and criticize people in public more often. And he's like, that's not me, Ben. I'm not gonna do that. So yeah, we mustn't conflict or associate empathy with weakness or too accommodating or low performance. If you want an example of that, just look at special forces from any country. Arguably one of the highest performing organizations in the world, very, very empathetic. The
Hmm.
leaders in special forces care deeply about their soldiers, know so much about them, and at the same time they ask them to do things where they are going into real present danger, and they might lose their lives. How do you balance it? I think on the one hand, it's about being really clear about expectations, standards, what performance looks like. And we still drive and push people to deliver that. And at the same time, we know our people. And when kind of real challenges crop up in their personal lives where we can, we flex and accommodate, knowing that the trade-off is that they want to reciprocate that and push hard.
Hmm.
But I think most leaders, most of us, have got a pretty good internal sense of intuition or gut feel about when we are being too accommodating or when someone in our team is trying to get one over on us. Again, to your point around sort of correcting course, when we was talking about the COVID analogy, like when you notice that's happening, then you address it.
I love the fact that you use special force as an example because I
Mm.
think that people relate to that. And that's an excellent example to use in that situation. Can you share a real life example of you coaching or guiding someone to shift the way they lead their people or their situation? And can you also give a background of the outcome?
So I think my general approach to that, Will, is really based on my absolute core, deep seated belief about leadership. So whether I'm coaching an individual or running some group training, this same message is always coming. And I really learned this again from the military, but I've absolutely carried it through and developed it when I was working in corporates and leading my own business. And really, it comes down to the fact that, for number one, I truly believe that to lead anybody is a great privilege and a great responsibility.
Yes.
Okay. The next layer is, what is the job of a leader? For me, it's fundamentally about supporting, developing, and looking after those people that we have got the privilege and responsibility to lead so that they can deliver the results that we're accountable for. Okay. Then I think we need to really understand and grasp the fact, and this was easy for me, started in the military, but really grasp the fact that every single person that we lead is the most important person in the world to somebody else. I often give a keynote talk about this. One of the exercises I do towards the end is I'll ask the audience a question, and I'll start by saying, in a moment, can you please stand up if you have a husband, wife, or partner who's currently in the workplace? So you get a chunk of the room stands up. Say, okay, please stay standing. Now, if you have got a son or daughter in the workplace, please stand up. Some more people stand up. If you've got mum or dad in the workplace, please stand up. And at this point, you get a couple of people who are still sitting down who get slightly worried, thinking, "Am I going to be included in this?" And then the final question is, if you've got a friend who you care deeply about in the workplace, please stand up. And suddenly, you've got a couple of hundred people in an auditorium all standing up. And I say, like, look around now. Everyone we lead is the most important person in the world to somebody else. And what we do as leaders, how we act, how we behave, what we ask of people, it doesn't just affect those people that work for us Monday to Friday, 9 till 5, or whatever your hours are. It affects them when they go home, and there's this ripple effect out to their loved ones. So that's one of the approaches I take to really help people grasp this point around it. And as I say, it was potentially easy for me, but I'm very fortunate for this to understand this because I went to Iraq in 2003 leading 35 soldiers, and every leader in the military, probably one of their main goals for joining the military is to deploy on operations somewhere and bring all of their soldiers back because you realize you're taking away
Yeah.
people's sons and daughters.
Yeah.
And then my second job after that was commanding a training unit where we took very junior soldiers into the British Army at age 17. And the day a new intake arrives, like the parents are there handing them over. And I can't tell you how many parents, normally the mums, who would get quite close to me on that day, like stare with steely cold eyes straight into mine and say, look after my son or daughter.
Yeah.
And like, I still get goosebumps telling that story now. Like they are handing over their most precious being in the world. So I think when we start to grasp that, in some ways, we don't need to do much more to lead with empathy. Just when we get that message, that's quite transformational. If we really get it in our heart as well as our head.
I think that's the most powerful example, right? A mom coming to you and says, "Taking care of my son and daughter." It
Sometimes
struck
they'd poke
support.
you in the chest as they were saying the words.
I want to make sure you get it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for using that story because I think that's so powerful and sticks with you. I think when you use story, people remember it and
Mm.
it lasts with them for a long time. I want to spend some time talking about your book.
Mm.
Don't just manage, coach.
Yeah.
You talk about unlocking a team's potential. How does empathy play a role in coaching mindset?
It's fundamental to it, really, really will. Again, if we look at sort of definitions of coaching, which interestingly, it's something that many leaders, managers think they understand, but often they're confusing it with mentoring, mostly because business and sport, you use those words with the opposite meanings. But I think at its most basic level, coaching in the workplace is about helping people to solve their own challenges. So you're giving them a sense of agency, building their confidence. And actually, when you take more of a coaching approach, a lot of the time you'll get to a better solution. Because again, as leaders, many times when people come to us with a challenge, we can default straight to just telling them how to do something because we
Yeah.
think maybe that's our job. Because we think as the leader, it's our job to have all the answers. We just go, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I know how to do this. But actually, is it the same as before? Have we really stopped to listen and understand what the challenge is? And that's where it comes back to empathy, right? It's been able to pause, say, okay, tell me more. Like what's going on for you? What is the challenge? What are you finding frustrating? Why is this so difficult? And when we understand their perspective and challenge a little bit more, we can ask better questions. We can be more supportive. And I think at its most powerful, and I had a great example of this just last week. I was running a Europe-wide leadership course, and we was doing some stuff around coaching. And in the build up to the coaching, we spent about 60 minutes, 90 minutes maybe, exploring listening. Right, really powerful skill, one that hardly any of us are really
Very
taught
hard.
taught much about. But it's a skill, and it's hard, right?
Yeah,
Especially
it's
in the
very
workplace,
hard.
it's hard to actually listen. And one of the exercises I got people to do in pairs was, right, in pairs, you're going to take it in turns to talk for just 4 minutes about a real challenge. Ideally, something work based, but it could be something in your personal life. The listener, your job is not to fix it. All I want you to do is focus on making the person that is speaking feel heard and understood. That's it. So we did the listening exercise. I stopped and said to the speakers, how did it feel? Everyone was like, amazing. I feel so much better. I don't feel the challenge is as significant. The listeners didn't really say anything. And that's empathy, right? Just
Yeah.
allowing the other person to speak and share what's going on for them, not just about the what and the tasks, but the impact and how they're feeling as well. And you could go, this is the point with coaching, right? Say, oh, I've not got time for that. I just need people to get on. But again, you're building agency. It's investment up front
Mm.
that is bringing you actually quite a quick return. Because what it means is people stop coming to you saying, Ben, I've got a problem. What should I do? If you
Mm.
just ask a few coaching type questions, that moves on to, Ben, I've got this challenge. I'm thinking I'm going to do this or maybe this. What do you think? That moves on over time to, Ben, I've got this challenge. I'm going to do this. Just checking with you before I pull the trigger on it. Great. And then very quickly you get to, Ben, just so you know, this happened. This is what I did, just in case anybody asks. Amazing.
That's
That's
growth.
that. That's
That's
growth.
growth and progress.
And for us, selfishly, that's more time back in our diary because
Yes,
our team are
exactly.
more self-sufficient, and no longer are we the genius with 1,000 helpers, as Jim Collins wrote in Good to Great.
Well, thank you for providing an example. Today we talk about empathy. We talk about how important it is in leadership, right? Spending the time to get to know our people. We also kind of deep dive around the topic of when a leader try to be empathetic, do they look over accommodating? And you give
Mm.
example of holding the space for people, so being there to hear someone's telling their story. If there are three takeaways from today's episode, what would those be?
Number one is obvious because I'm so passionate about it. It would be just remember that every single person we lead is the most important person in someone else's life. Absolutely number one. Linked to that, I think I'd say remember this as a bit of a brain tattoo that if we don't care about our people, how can we expect them to care about the work? And the third one probably is empathetic leadership is absolutely compatible with high performance.
Well, thank you for sharing the three takeaway. If my audience wants to reach out to you to have a conversation or maybe invite you to speak at their event, how would they reach you? What's the best way?
Two ways, really. LinkedIn, I'm very, very active on LinkedIn. So just search for Ben Morton Leadership and you'll find me. Or alternatively, my website is dead easy to find because it's my name, benmorton.com, and you'll find me there.
Thank you, Ben, for your time. I appreciate you being a guest on my podcast and have a good day.
You too, Will. Thanks very much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
You're welcome.